It happens that I like brutalist architecture in general because I like the what is not said about those who created what is called brutalist architecture, that behind the apparent brutalist aesthetics, sometimes I think there is sensitivity. And I know it sounds paradoxical, because you wouldn't expect a very sensitive soul behind a brutalist gesture, but I think this could be sometimes the case. Poetry requires something enormous, barbaric, and wild, said Denis Diderot. I like this saying from Diderot. Now, I think he was not at all someone who, well, maybe he created, the encyclopedia, which was enormous, but it was certainly not barbaric and wild. But I like this saying by Denis Diderot: poetry requires something enormous, barbaric, and wild. And it reminds me of a quotation from Oscar Wilde, who said, "Moderation is fatal, only excess succeeds." And brutalist architecture perhaps is rather connected with excess and with what is called barbaric and wild, maybe even enormous. So architecture with a hammer, to paraphrase Friedrich Nietzsche. And this is a church in Köln, in Cologne, in Germany. And it's a building that I admire, and in my opinion is superior to many buildings done by Santiago Calatrava. I don't know if it's still if it's used, this church. Sorry, I don't know why this image doesn't advance. Okay. Again, this is just the first attempt towards a presentation about brutalist architecture. I still have to work on it, but I have about 60 or so images, and I'll show them to you. This was is something else. It's not the church in Köln. Also brutalist architecture, also a lot of concrete, the polluting concrete. This is the church in Vienna, built by a sculptor, not by an architect. I don't know who built this one. I should know, and I don't even know if it is built actually. Brutalist buildings threatened by right-wing politicians as part of attack on the welfare state. Yes, there is a hatred towards brutalist architecture, but on the other hand, there is also admiration. For example, in New York City, there was an exhibition called Communist Cosmic Constructions, about mostly, buildings built in concrete in communism. But this is actually the work of Allison and Peter Smithson in Great Britain, and it was I don't know if it survived. It was meant for demolition, although the architects were very well known, Allison and Peter Smithson. But yes, brutalism is it had a comeback success the last years. There was even a traveling exhibition, SOS Brutalismus. There are books published with this very title, SOS, which means danger, SOS Brutalismus. I don't know where this was built. In former Yugoslavia, in Serbia, there are some great brutalist structures, truly great. But here we look at a building by what's his name? North American architect. I'm getting old. I'm beginning to forget. And I made a presentation on him. I feel like saying Richard Meyer. I'm pathetic. I should stop making these presentations. The housing complex in Belgrade. Now I show an image from Serbia. Here it is. I think these works in concrete do have value, do have force, and particularly when they try to express a collective, form of living and maybe a collective aspiration. I find poetry even in these images. This is also from Belgrade. Brutalist buildings of Belgrade. Here they are. They are more convincing than, large-scale housing complexes in Romania. Residential building, Leonardo Savioli, a very interesting architect in Italy, and Danilo Santi, 1964-1967 in Florence. Here it is. Leonardo Savioli, yes, I should make a presentation one day on him because he's truly an excellent architect. Now in Venice, should we call this brutalist? Perhaps not with a lot of conviction. It has a vigor, it has a certain level of, assertive masculinity, but I wouldn't really call it brutalist. It's a rather sophisticated building, and even with a certain level of mundanity. But anyway, it's in Florence, where it's so difficult to assert yourself as a modern architect. What is this? Also in Italy, Trieste, 1969-1982, a housing complex, a large housing complex. Socialism was strong in Italy, and even communism, and this is shown in some architectural projects, especially those of public housing, collective housing, a lot of concrete again. That's why I dare to talk about this today. Residential buildings for the military housing cooperative in Madrid, Spain. At least here the green climbs on the building, and where the green does so, always the result is, in my opinion, positive. Always. It doesn't matter how ugly the building. When ivy climbs on the building, it rescues it from ugliness or other negative traits. Madrid. But behind the green, there is a lot of concrete. Brutalist architecture in Barcelona. Not particularly brutalist. I don't even know. I took some of these materials from the web with these titles, brutalist architecture, but for me it's modernistic, but is it really brutalist? I'm not so sure. I mean, there is brutalism in Fritz Wotrubas church in Vienna, yes, there is. But here, now we look at the work of Thaler de Arquitectura and Ricardo Bofill. And here, yes, here is, and I'm very surprised that Herzog and de Moron, the Swiss architects, built this structure, which is called the Reading Room in China. And I like it very much. It's a sculpture. It's a sculpture which excites people to climb on it and get inside. And, it's provocative. It is an invitation to explore it. It's kind of a building without prescribed function, despite the fact that it's called the Reading Room. I think the title came after the structure was built. I think that the building was built without anticipating a certain function, and then after it was built, possible functions were found, or possible raison d'être for the building to be. In a way, this is what Lebbeus-Woods advised us to do, to first build our buildings and then discover how to live in them, which is, of course, the very opposite of what the the functionalist would say or do. This was also built in former Serbia. They had some very heroic structures built. There are many of them scattered over former Yugoslavia, not just in Serbia. This is one of them. It's very, it's surprising, and it's still astonishingly fresh, and it looks, otherworldly. Yes, in Serbia, they had their own version of communism, and they encouraged, explorations in architecture, perhaps not only in architecture, that were, rather non-conformist and courageous and heroic, like this one. And welcome to Bucharest. I found this picture actually in a kind of aide-memoire with brutalist architectures. Is it a brutalist building? I wouldn't say so, but the bottom part, has a certain vigor that some people would say belongs to brutalist, maybe. But this is, and it's actually the work of a sculptor. And I like it very much, particularly because it is darkened by time. This concrete raw, it's truly a raw architecture. It's a sculptural work. It's actually a sculpture. But I find it stimulating visually. And all for the better that it is so-called dirty and dark. I mean, a brutalist architecture should be like this, dirty and dark. Otherwise, excessive Apollonian qualities would subtract from its brutalist status. Like here, for example, La Fleur du Mal. Maybe we can make a presentation or a discussion about Baudelaire and brutalism, and not because both words start with letter B. La Fleur du Mal. Boston City Hall in Boston, USA. I forgot the name of the architects. I think it's a good work, but some people hate it because it's too heroic, and heroic architecture is uncomfortable for many, because it's not sweet, it's not soothing. It's not a soothing architecture. Ministry of Highway Construction, Tbilisi, Georgia, 1975. Look at this. So, Ministry of Highway Construction from 1975 in Georgia. What Rem Koolhaas did in Singapore is less radical than what they did in Georgia in 1975. Not bad. A vigorous, assault on nature and on comfortability and on the bourgeois spirit by courageous construction, which is, after all, the Ministry of Highway Construction. So I guess, the looks of the building serve the, the functions within. Yes, with concrete, you can do spectacular things, but let us not forget what we read earlier about the effects of using concrete. Basel College of Art and Design in Switzerland, 1961. Concrete again. Tower House in Tokyo, 1966. Concrete again. I kind of like it, it's raw. I don't know if you know, Zaha Hadid, her ideal was to make an architecture that was vital, raw, and I think her architecture could be to an extent considered to be vital, but is not raw and is not earthy, because she said in a statement, I want to make an architecture that is vital, raw, and earthy. But I don't think she arrived at an architecture that is raw and earthy. This one is raw, but it's not earthy. It's hard to do all three of them. Orange County offices and courthouse in New York, 1967. Again, I have a, I'm totally ashamed because I know the architect and it's just I don't remember his name, which is clearly a sign of getting old. It's troublesome. I keep thinking of someone else, and I know it doesn't belong to that someone else. Brazil, 1974. I think these are the last images of this short attempt to describe brutalist architecture. And I like this one more than what Calatrava did in Rio de Janeiro. You know, it's a smaller building. It's yes, it has its own spectacle, and it is, yes, in concrete, and it is raw, and it is brutalist, but I like it. And what is this? Costa Rica, 1976, an apartment building also with lots of concrete and concrete again. An embassy of Russia in Havana, Cuba, 1985, with the triumphalism that Russia is unable to avoid, unfortunately. Madrid, 2008, Ensemble Studio. They are interesting architects, but they build this house for themselves that, in my opinion, is very grandiloquent. Architecture out of the comfort zone, said Deborah Mesa, who is the feminine partner of the two architects who built it. It's their own house, but it doesn't look like a house. It almost looks like a highway. This bravura house gives the illusion of a huge weight of concrete supported by nothing more than a sheer glass wall. It is the home of Anton Garcia Abril and Deborah Mesa, principals of the architecture practice Ensemble Studio, who say that engineering took a year, while the prefabricated structure was erected in just 7 days. This is the house. It's certainly not one of the most bucolic pastoral houses ever built by human beings, no. In fact, if you didn't know it was a house, a private house, you would have said it's some kind of a museum or a part of a museum or a museum in the process of becoming. I'm rather disappointed because I know another work by them which I like very much. But this one is, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. If I said certain things of a negative nature towards Calatrava, I feel tempted to say something rather similar about this. But again, maybe without a direct experience of the building, I should be a little bit more reticent about expressing judgments. And this is, I end with this. This is actually, I don't know how it was done with Photoshop, with some kind of a, structure or building created by manipulating, images through the many means we have today. And I like that because I like this impossible building, because it's this tension, this drama between nature and man, between nature and concrete. And maybe this tension is unavoidable. We build splendid structures, but in time, always nature has the upper hand. Whatever Winnie Maas said, that we should try to outsmart nature. There is no way you can outsmart nature. Plus, we are inside also nature. We are nature too. So if nature doesn't destroy us, we destroy ourselves, and this can be seen clearly in Ukraine. Thank you.